Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we're going to begin the funeral service of Dr. Stanley R. Rosen. Officiating is Rabbi Yosef Samuels. This time, just again, a last and gentle reminder, please be sure that your phones have been turned off.
Adonai mo'odam v'teida'eu b'nenesh v'techashveu odam lehevel domo yomov ketzei loiveir b'beker yotzitz v'cholov le'erev yemoilel v'yovesh lemnois yemenu kein heida v'novi levav chochma shmor tom ure'ei yoshor ki achris le'ish shalom acha lehim yivde nafshi miyat she'ol ki yikecheni selo Kolo she'eri ulvovi tzur levovi v'chelki elehim la'olam v'yoshov ha'ofor al ha'oretz k'shehoya v'haruach toshuv el ha'elehim asher nesana. O Lord, what is man that you should notice him? What is mortal man that you should consider him? Man is like a breath, his days are like a passing shadow. He flourishes and grows in the morning, he fades and withers in the evening. Teach us how to number our days, that we may attain a heart of wisdom. Mark the innocent, look upon the upright, for there is a future for the men of peace. Surely God will free me from the grave, he will receive me indeed. My flesh and my heart fail, yet God is my strength forever. The dust returns to the earth as it was, but the spirit returns to God who gave it. I'm going to say a psalm or two. I'm going to say it in English in honor of Judy. A prayer by Moses, the man of God. My Lord, you have been a shelter for us in every generation. Before the mountains came into being, before you created the earth and the world, forever and ever, you are Almighty God. You diminish man until he is crushed, and you say, return, you children of man. Indeed, 1,000 years are in your eyes like yesterday, that has passed like a watch of the night. The stream of their life is but a slumber in the morning. They are like grass that sprouts anew. In the morning it thrives and sprouts anew, in the evening it withers and dries. For we are consumed by your anger and destroyed by your wrath. You have set our wrongdoings before you, our hidden sins before the light of your countenance. For all our days have vanished in your wrath. We cause our years to pass like a fleeting sound. The days of our lives number 70 years, and if in great vigor, 80 years. Most of them are but travail and futility, passing quickly and flying away. Who can know the intensity of your anger? Your wrath is commensurate with one's fear of you. Teach us then to reckon our days, that we may acquire a wise heart. Relent, O Lord. How long will your anger last? Have compassion upon your servants. Satiate us in the morning with your kindness. Then we shall sing and rejoice throughout our days. Give us joys corresponding to the days you afflicted us. The years we have seen adversity. Let your work be revealed to your servants, and your splendor be upon their children. May the pleasantness of the Lord our God be upon us. Establish for us the work of our hands. Establish the work of our hands. Yoshev b'seiser elyon shel shadi yislein and meladri machshim sedos elai aftach boy ki hu yatzilch mipach yakush v'davar avois v'brosa yosech lach v'sachas k'nof avtechza tzino v'sachero amite l'sidim v'bachat leilam v'chetzi of yemam midever b'efeli halech meketav yosher tzoroim yipil mitzit ke'elef v'vov v'menecha lecha le'igosh rak be'necha sabed v'shilumas v'shoim tera ki ato adonri machsi elyon samto minecha Leisun elecha rov and egel ikra balecha kimalocha b'tzaveloch l'shmorcha b'chol derechecha. Al kapayim yisu uncha pantigev be'evan aglecha al shachal v'fes and tidrech tzirmeis kefir v'san and kevir choshag v'falteyu v'sagvei kuyad shmi yikrahini v'neyu v'ime anechi b'tzora achalseu v'chavdeu erech yomim asvieu v'yareu v'shuasi. I would like to ask the Rebbe's emissary for Southeast Wisconsin, Rabbi Tzvi Horowitz, very good friend of Dr. Rosen and of the whole family. You should come up and say the prayer, Psalm 23. He'll read it in Hebrew and in the English.
Mizmar LeDavid, Adonai Rei Le'echsar, Bnei Stashi Abitzeni, Al Mimenuchis Yinalini, Nafshi Yesheviv Yancheni, Mimaglei Tzedek L'man Shemai, Gam Keilach Begitz Amavis, Le'ira Rak Yata Yimadi, Shift Chamin Shantecha Hema Yinachamuni, Tarech L'fanei Shulchan Neged Tzedek, Di Shanta V'Shemen Reishi, Kaisi Revaye, Achtei V'Chesed Yerdefuni Kol Yimei Chayai, V'Shavti B'Veis Adonai Le'irach Yamim. Psalm of David, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall lack nothing. He lays me down in green pastures, he leads me beside still waters. He revives my soul. He redirects me in the paths of righteousness for the sake of his name. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they will comfort me. You'll prepare a table for me before my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup is full. Only goodness and kindness shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for many more years.
Rabbi Hillel, Yampol, brother-in-law, Stanley, come up.
People come to funerals of people they know and care for in adult life without knowing much about the person's early life. Before my comments, I want to share a comment from a dear friend of Stanley's. Stanley was a social person, but very selective in the people that he was close with. There were few of them, and one of them, who's still living, thank God, sent this message. I don't know whether my memories of Stanley will be useful. Nevertheless, I want you, Carol, and Lynn to be aware of them because they are profoundly precious to me. I met Stanley and also Carol when their father, Rabbi Milton Rosen, was employed as head of the Talmud Torah I was attending in Dallas in 1940. I was 11, and I believe Stanley was about a year and a half younger. Since Stanley and I were more advanced than other students, Rabbi Rosen taught Stanley and me separately and regularly with exemplary love and dedication for close to 2 years, at which time my family moved to Chicago in 1942. In addition, both Stanley and I sang together in the choir at the local chazan in Dallas. In 1944, circumstances brought Stanley to Chicago to study in the yeshiva. We soon reconnected, and both of us joined the Hashomer Hadati Youth Religious Zionist Organization. One of the activities there was a makelah, a choir, comprised of a number of the members. It just so happened that the director was not truly qualified, and at one point, Stanley, pointing to me, said, "If you want someone who knows how to do it, he's the one." Without hesitation, the director asked me to take over. Although I was not personally involved, I think it is vital to mention that moment turned out to be decisive in the future course of my life. Soon the Makhelah became widely known and acclaimed in the Chicago Jewish community. And music, especially Jewish music, continually became the driving force in my life. Moreover, Stanley sang in several of other choirs I led in subsequent years. Stanley was a true friend, a wonderful person. May his memory be blessed. With profound sympathy, Shalom Caleb. Those of you who know anything about liturgical music, Jewish historical music, would know the name Shalom Caleb. I know Shalom too. Very wonderful, sweet, and sincere person. He has gathered history of all the music, literal music in Judaism, has published several books, is the only one to have found and documented many of these melodies as internationally known by people in that field as the outstanding scholar in this. He attributes that direction in his life to Stanley. I met Stanley before I met his sister Carol, my dear wife-to-be. He was a new guy in the Albany Park neighborhood and getting attention from all the girls. He was cool. He met Bernice Barach, who I knew from Bnei Akiva. They fell in love and married. A few years later, I married Carol. And Stan and I became brothers-in-law, and the four of us became close. Stanley had a dream to be a doctor, but that was a costly career in those days, and there was no funding. So after working at Cook County Hospital and taking medical-related courses, he gave up the concept, and he and Bernice decided to make Aliyah. His father, Rabbi Milton Rosen, one of the first graduates from the Hebrew Theological College in Chicago, had not been happy in the rabbinate and had become a military chaplain and was then stationed in the Far East. So Stan and Bernice took his mother, Sarah, and his sister, Carol, when they went on Aliyah. About 8 months after they were in Israel, the U.S. draft for the Korean War began, and Stanley was called up in the draft, which is why the flag is here. In those days, if you didn't answer the call, you lost your American citizenship. So they came back to America, and he was sent to Korea. From a young age, Stanley had been sent to the yeshiva in Chicago, so he had little growing up time with his father. But his father was his chaplain in Korea. So as an adult, he got to really know his father, and later wrote a book about his father's experiences in the Korean War. When he finished his military stint, he was entitled to educational funds under the GI Bill. So he now had funds to pursue his dream and go to medical school in Switzerland. Because the American schools admitted students straight out of high school and college pre-med, they thought he was too old to start medical school and turned down his applications. Still undeterred, he decided to go out of the States and found there were schools in Europe accepting American students. He learned French to go to school in Switzerland, but was then accepted to a German-speaking school in Switzerland. But the school year was beginning, so he had to learn German while attending courses in German. He was always an excellent student, and he graduated with honors. Stan spent most of his medical career in Kenosha, Wisconsin, where he was active in leadership in the medical community as well. He was always thoroughly committed to whatever he did, and in Kenosha, there was a small, hardly surviving Jewish community with a classical, beautiful, small shul where he went to services. Once he got involved, he wanted to see things happen. So, in addition to the heavy demands of a medical practice, he and Bernice took on major commitments of time and funds to the shul and helped to become stronger and survive for many years, running himself to make a minyan, davening from the Amud, etc. And he continued his Jewish studies with steady and ready help of Rabbi Samuels, who came regularly from Milwaukee to Kenosha, and sadly, today. We all had a wonderful experience one year when Stanley arranged for his father to serve as rabbi for the shul in Kenosha for the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur services. He then had our family come so I could daven the Shachri services and he could do Musaf beautifully and sweetly with his grandfather on his mother's side, melodies. He was a strong person, committed, sincere, devoted to his practice, to his shul, to his community, to his family, and a scholar and perennial student in the truest of Jewish tradition. He gave of himself in his medical practice and gave of himself in his Jewish world. He was one of the people on earth who helps keep it running and focused as human beings, as citizens, and as Jews. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. Shalom Alecha, dear brother. Carol's sister, my dear wife, Carol, has some comments. I didn't set it up good for you, I'm sorry.
Excuse me. Just give me a minute. As of today, I have lost my big brother, my childhood hero. We didn't always get along. He'd tease me and I'd tease him, and we didn't always understand how much we meant to each other. When we were very young, the Second World War began. Stanley would play war with me. This required a piece of paper and a pencil. He would draw all these symbols on paper, and then we would close our eyes and kill them with a pencil. I didn't know until years later that my helmets were the German ones. Our Zadie taught him and his best friend forever, Paul, their bar mitzvah portions. He taught them their bar mitzvah portions and his melodies, which Stanley used to sing so beautifully in choirs growing up and in leading services for years at the synagogue in Kenosha. One year, I didn't hear Hillel's speech, so I may have some repetition here. I apologize. I didn't know until years later. Oh, no, I'm sorry. One year, Stanley, Hillel, and my dad led services together for the Chagim. When we were children, Stanley would draw paper dolls for me, but they all looked like detectives smoking cigarettes. He went to the yeshiva and came home late, but he would take me out for my science projects, looking for leaves in the dark, or building a lamp with me from a little glass vase and an enormous metal pipe that leaned over crookedly. He taught me how to play 52-card pickup. He took me to Riverview and was very embarrassed when I choked on the popcorn he bought me. He let me come with him to the park on the lake, but made me sit on my blanket on my own hill so that he could flirt freely. We used to put on acts together at our Aunt Becky's resort, Pine Grove in South Haven. Stanley had beautiful dark wavy hair and held on to the mic and crooned like Frank Sinatra. When our dad was a rabbi in Madison, Wisconsin, Dad wrote plays for the Hebrew school students. One of my fondest memories is a Purim play where the girls were all princesses in pretty costumes coming before Achashverosh. Dad gave me the role of the Princess Helena from Abyssinia because of my strong southern accent. After all the princesses had been seen, it was announced that there was still one more princess to be seen. Out came this wiry, amazing dancer in orange pantaloons, Stanley. My mother had secretly made him a costume. He pulled it off, brought down the house, you know. One Sukkot night, Mother asked him to take me and my friend sukkah hopping. He said no. He was going to meet his new girlfriend, Bernice. He left and soon came back, supposedly to change shoes, but really because he was a good brother. That night I met Hillel in the sukkah. When he and Bernice decided to make Aliyah, they insisted that Mother and I go too, and we did. Stan carrying a cello someone asked him to bring to Israel. He got a job as an announcer with the BBC. Then he was drafted into the U.S. Army. At that time, you could not have dual citizenship, and he had to go back to the States to serve. When we returned from Israel, I had been out of school a long time and didn't feel good about going back to high school. So he took me to Roosevelt University and we met with the dean. The dean said, "They are giving the entrance exam in 1 hour. Take it and see how you do." Stanley took me to an empty classroom and wrote the parts of speech on the board to prepare me. Then other subjects. He was amazing. The dean let me enter college, provided, as he put it, I would never pursue math. So Stan was able to get leave from Korea and went to Japan, where our dad was head of the JWB Center and rabbi of the synagogue. Stanley later wrote a book translating from Yiddish Dad's war articles published in the foreword and during the Korean War. It was called A Rabbi in Korea in Dad's honor. Away at service, he wrote Mom and me constantly. When I had a problem or decision to make, the letters were long, light, and helpful. Each began with kid. I still have many of those letters today. He was quite the advice giver, sharing long letters helping me search my soul. When I began dating and Stanley was back home, he would call me, putting on a voice, and ask me out. When I realized it was him, I would yell, "You took the time someone could have called me, and now I don't have a date for Saturday night." He would laugh so hard and say, "Don't worry, you'll get a date." When Stanley wanted to get into medical school, his childhood dream, there were quotas. When he returned from the Army, he had the GI Bill and applied to school in France and Switzerland. He learned both languages, just in case. Stanley was accepted in Zurich, Switzerland, but he learned, of course, French better. Stanley was accepted in Zurich, Switzerland, and he, Bernice, and Lynn were on their way. They learned Swiss Deutsch, and so did Lynn. He worked hard at school. Bernice set up a beautiful home, and soon arrived their darling son, Jeffrey. Rest in peace. Stanley graduated, came home, and did his internship at Cook County and residency at Illinois Masonic. He practiced in Zion, Illinois for a while, eventually moved to Kenosha, Wisconsin, where he was chief of staff at Kenosha Memorial Hospital. He and Bernice worked together to set up his busy, thriving internal medicine practice there. I'm missing a page, I think. Their love was a match made in heaven. So eager to marry, my mom had to sign for him because he wasn't of age. They had a busy and fulfilling life there until his retirement. When Bernice passed away, he searched for a place to settle. I was comforted place to settle. When Bernice passed away, it was very hard. I was comforted when he found Judy, and they found each other, and built a peaceful home with companionship and lots of laughter. Stanley and I shared beautiful times and difficult times. We loved one another deeply and together had to learn how to go on after the loss of Jeffrey. We were blessed to have a mother who lived a long life and an amazing confidant to each of us. We raised our children like siblings and loved them equally. When Lynn was born, I felt she was part of me too, and always will. She was the first. Stanley was dapper, charming, and fun. Everyone loved him dearly. He was my big brother, and I adored him.
There's not much to say after those beautiful tributes, but I just want to say that my father was a study in contrasts. He was strict, but very tender. Jay's nodding his head, very strict. He was dignified, but a terrible rascal, as Carol knows. He was devout, but very rebellious. And there's a story behind that, too. He was a modern man with 19th century verbiage. I don't understand anybody who says something like vouchsafed. Who uses language like that? He was a fighter, but he was a lover. And he was a rule maker and a rule breaker. He was proud, but he was very humble. And he was a great son and a great father. He showed me the way that I should go. My parents were amazing to me. I'll never forget everything they did for me. My father especially, because I had no artistic talent whatsoever. I guess I had to default into medicine. So he showed me how to be a good doctor, a caring person about everyone in my care. He was very proud of what I did. He told me that all the time. I was very proud of him. He was actually my preceptor in a summer rotation in Kenosha. So it was a privilege to be a student. And I was very, very proud of how he taught me to be a good Zionist as well. It's lasted to this day. He was a very good grandfather to my kids, very devoted to them, and strict with them as well. But they understood. And a very tender husband, sweet, and very devoted to his family. There's nothing I can say other than I'm so glad that he showed me the way that I should walk, the way that I should go in this life, because it was really a privilege. I'll miss him terribly.
You want to say something?
Try. I'm Judy Rosen. For 50 years, I knew Stanley Rosen as my doctor. Well, for 25 years of that, until he retired. I adored him. He was just, he was always right. You know, he was somebody, we talked politics, we talked religion. His office visits were always interesting. My office visits to him. And then 12 years ago, I had the privilege of coming to know him as Stan. It took a while for me to get over calling him Dr. Rosen. So for quite a while, I just didn't call him anything because I couldn't bring myself to call him by his first name. But I'll treasure his love forever, and I'll love him forever. He taught me how to laugh, and I'll miss him terribly. And I love his daughter, and his grandchildren, and his sister. They've all been family to me, and Tzvi, who has been so generous with his time. Thank you very much for all of you.
We came together to pay our last respects to a person who is above us all. His name in Hebrew is the symbol of that. It was Shabtai, which means my Shabbos. And what is Shabbos? It's 24 hours, but it's a day above all the 6 days of the week. It's above it all. It's above it all in its exalted, its holiness. By divine providence, he passed away on Shabbos. And not only did he pass away on Shabbos, the Torah reading of that week tells the story of the giving of the Torah. And the giving of the Torah, the day the Torah was given, according to Jewish tradition, was on Shabbos. In addition to which, the commandment to keep Shabbos is in this portion, which tells the story of the giving of the Torah and the Ten Commandments. And of course, one of the Ten Commandments is Shabbos. In Pirkei Avot, we are told that the world stands upon three things, three pillars: a pillar of Torah, a pillar of service to God, which includes prayer, and the doing of acts of kindness. Our sages say that a human being is a little world. He might be a little world compared to the big world, but regarding one's life, a person is a big world and a full world. And especially Dr. Rosen. He lived for 91 years. Even that number has great significance. The Torah says that the ultimate human being is likened to a tree. Man is like a tree of a field, because a tree gives fruits and is able to reproduce and represents the revelation of godliness on the earth. And the word for tree in Hebrew is Elon, and the numerical value of Elon is 91. Another great significance about this number: in our tradition, God's name is written one way. It's written Yud-Kei Vov-Kei, but we pronounce it A-D-O-N-O-Y, which is Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Yud-Kei Vov-Kei equals 26, and Aleph Daled Nun Yud equals 65. Together they equal 91. So the number 91 is the symbol of God's name, the way it's written and the way it's pronounced. It's very rare to find a human being who excelled in all three of these pillars and excel in a most dignified, respected way. We studied together close to 40 years. We finished Masechta Bava Kama. If you know anything, it's not an easy tractate to study, but we finished the whole thing. And we almost finished Masechta Yevumis. Masechta Yevumis is one of the most difficult tractates in the Talmud. And after we would have our study session, Stanley would go downstairs to the library, take out the Talmud, and study it again and review it. He took his study very seriously. He was a Jew who believed in God and believed in the Torah and the divinity of the Torah, the very depth of his soul. Even the class with me wasn't enough. He had a class with Rabbi Voloshansky in Gemara too for many years. His knowledge in Judaism was extraordinary. The pillar of service, especially synagogue service, when he prayed, when he led the services, his voice would be so inspiring. He knew the nusach, he knew the exact way to say them, the music that goes along with it. And he inspired so many people who came to daven. One of the things that stays in my mind is on Rosh Hashanah. It's necessary to blow the shofar. Circumstances would have it. He couldn't go anywhere. He was home, and he needed to blow the shofar. So he asked me to buy him a few shofars. And as difficult as it was for him, he practiced and practiced the blowing of the shofar, so that when Rosh Hashanah should come, he would be able to blow the shofar. And the pillar of deeds of loving kindness. His whole life he dedicated to helping so many people, physically, as a doctor, and spiritually. Because people didn't just come and tell him their aches and pains, they also told him what was bothering them, what was on their soul. I can never forget the matriarch of Kenosha, Zelda Shalou. She would say, "Mein doctor, darling." That's how much she loved him. He gave of his soul, his money, his time to whoever turned to him, especially his family. He was just a wonderful father. He raised a daughter together with Bernice. A daughter that represents the best and the richest and the most wonderful of both of them. And especially in recent times, where Lynn and Tzvi, her husband, fulfilled this mitzvah of respecting a parent in what we call in Hebrew, mahadrim min amhadrin, in the most beautiful, most special way. The whole community looked up at him with such respect. He was like a prince, so dignified in everyone's eyes. His opinions and his advice, which he told people about in a very soft voice. I never heard him raise his voice. I don't know if he did, but I never heard it. As our sages say, the words of the wise are heard when they're spoken quietly. All the kaleidoscope of the community had great respect for him. He was the spiritual life of Judaism in our whole community, accepted by all. He had a very deep faith, and I must mention how one of his nieces needed a special blessing to be healed. It was many years ago. We traveled to the Rebbe's resting place. It was on the intermediate days of Sukkot. There was nothing there. It was just an empty cemetery. Today, there's a big building. You can have food, but then there was nothing there. And we traveled in the morning, and we came back at night. It was Sukkot, so we didn't eat anything outside the sukkah. And he went and poured his heart out by the Rebbe's resting place. And God listened to his prayers, and a lot of joy and happiness and nachas. And like this person told me before, it was a real miracle. By the laws of nature, it's not understood how this happened. But his life was full of challenges. losing his only son was a wound that never healed. But somehow he managed to rebuild his life and to continue to be this wonderful person in every which way for his family, for the community, and for the world. His sister lost a brother. His daughter lost a father. The grandchildren lost a grandfather. The nephews and nieces lost an uncle. And Judy lost a husband. And our community lost its leader. And I lost a very good friend, as I'm sure many of you feel that way. I would like to take this opportunity, in spite of all the challenges, I want to thank Judy for giving Stan wonderful years, his last years of life, giving him a lot of joy and happiness, peace of mind. And I'm sure the Almighty will reward her in kind. May we merit the day when God will erase the tears from everyone's face. We won't know of any more sorrow. And may his memory be a blessing and an inspiration to all of us to continue in his path of being attached to Hashem, his Torah, and good deeds for many years to come. We'll rise now for the Kale Moy. Yampol rachamim shechein b'reimim hamsei menucha nechainal kanfei ashchino b'maylas hagdoshim uteirem k'zeir rakia mazhirim es nishmas Shabtai ben Michoel sheholach lo'ilomai Bavor shenad v'tzedako b'adas koros nishmosei b'gan Eden tehem menuchosei Lochein balo rachmim yastereu b'seiser kenofov leilomim v'yitzror b'tzror achayim es nishmosei adinoyu nachalosei v'yenuach al mishkovei b'sholom v'nomar omein. O God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant true rest upon the wings of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, in the exalted spheres of the holy and pure, who shine as the resplendence of the firmament, to the soul of Shabtai and the son of Michael, who has gone to his supernal world. For charity has been donated in remembrance of his soul. May his place of rest be in Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. Therefore, may all merciful one shelter him with the cover of his wings forever and bind his soul in the bond of life. The Lord is his heritage. May he rest in his resting place in peace. And let us all say, Amen. And you can all be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, services here at the chapel are now concluded. The interment will continue at Zion Garden Cemetery in Chicago. The family will be together at the Gershon residence at 6545 North LeMay Avenue in Lincolnwood. They'll be observing traditional Shiva. Please note that times are on the service folder. Memorial contributions to Beth Israel Sinai Congregation or Chabad of Kenosha, that information is also on the service folder. For those of you who are joining us live stream, all that information as far as Shiva and charitable contributions you can find on our website. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession to the cemetery, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing a car. It will be in the back of the procession. Please be sure that you keep a safe distance from the car in front of you. Use your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. At this time, I invite everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the casket of Dr. Stanley R. Rosen from the chapel, and then you may return to your cars.
I'm telling you.
Family, come this way.
Deborah was right.